Zendaya's story doesn't begin with privilege, shortcuts, or overnight fame. It begins with discipline, observation, and a young girl learning very early that the world doesn't hand you space. You earn it, because before the awards, before the red carpets, before her name carried weight in every corner of pop culture, Zendaya was simply a thoughtful, hardworking child growing up in Oakland, California, surrounded by creativity, but grounded by reality, raised by parents who believe that talent means nothing without humility, effort, and respect, lessons that quietly shaped her long before the spotlight ever found her. From a young age, she learned to move between worlds, between ambition and responsibility, between dreaming big and staying rooted, and this balance became her foundation because Zendaya was never chasing fame blindly, she was chasing growth, expression, and purpose. Even when she didn't yet have the language to describe it, her early exposure to the arts wasn't about glamour. It was about work, repetition, and learning how to listen, whether it was dancing for hours, training her body to understand rhythm and discipline, or watching adults navigate creative spaces with professionalism. She absorbed everything like a student who knew preparation mattered more than attention. Long before audiences saw confidence on screen, Zendaya was building it privately, through practice, through failure, through being the youngest person in the room and choosing to observe rather than dominate, and that quiet intelligence would later become one of her most powerful traits in an industry that often mistakes noise for strength. When her first real opportunities came, they didn't arrive as validation. They arrived as tests because stepping into entertainment at a young age means growing up under pressure, scrutiny, and expectations that most people don't face until much later. And Zendaya had to learn fast how to protect her identity while still evolving publicly. As her visibility increased, so did the challenges, because early success often comes with labels, assumptions, and boxes designed by other people, and Zendaya found herself navigating an industry eager to define her before she had fully defined herself. Yet, instead of resisting loudly or rebelling destructively, she chose a smarter path, a slower path, one built on intention, patience, and self-respect. She understood that longevity required restraint, that saying no could be as powerful as saying yes, and that every decision she made would either expand or limit her future. And this awareness set her apart from many peers who burned bright but briefly. While others rushed to grow up on screen, Zendaya took control of her narrative, refusing to trade depth for speed, refusing to compromise her values just to remain visible, and in doing so, she began to quietly rewrite the rules that young women in Hollywood were expected to follow. What makes Zendaya's rise remarkable is not just her talent, but her timing, because she understood that growth cannot be rushed without cost. And instead of chasing immediate validation, she invested in evolution, developing her craft, refining her voice, and learning how to command space without shouting. And this patience paid off as she transitioned into roles that demanded emotional complexity, vulnerability, and strength beyond her years. When audiences began to see her differently, not just as a performer but as an artist, it wasn't accidental. It was the result of years of preparation behind the scenes, years of learning how to carry responsibility without resentment, how to be visible without being consumed, and how to mature publicly without losing authenticity. As her career expanded, so did her influence, but Zendaya approached influence with the same care she approached her work, understanding that visibility comes with responsibility, that being seen means being watched, and that representation matters whether you ask for it or not. And rather than shrinking under that weight, she stood taller, choosing to use her platform thoughtfully, intentionally, and without performative noise. She didn't try to be everything to everyone. She focused on being honest, informed, and respectful, knowing that real impact doesn't come from perfection, but from consistency and integrity over time. In an industry obsessed with trends, Zendaya became something rarer. Dependable, not predictable, but principled. Someone whose presence signaled quality, intention, and trust. Her fashion choices, often discussed as moments of boldness and reinvention, were never just about clothes. They were statements of autonomy, creativity, and self-definition, reflections of a young woman refusing to be minimized or styled into someone else's comfort zone. And each appearance reinforced the same message her career choices conveyed, that she was in control of her image, her voice, and her future. Yet despite global recognition, Zendaya never adopted the distance or detachment that fame often breeds. Instead, she remained grounded, thoughtful, and aware, speaking with the calm confidence of someone who knows that attention is temporary but character endures. What truly elevates Zendaya's story is the way she carries success without arrogance, ambition without cruelty, and confidence without dismissal of others. Because even as she reached milestones many never touch, she continued to speak openly about growth, uncertainty, and the ongoing process of becoming, reminding people that success is not a finish line but a responsibility to keep learning. She didn't present herself as flawless. She presented herself as evolving, and that honesty resonated deeply in a culture hungry for realness beneath the polish. As she stepped into roles that challenged audiences and expectations, she proved that depth and mainstream success are not opposites, that intelligence and popularity can coexist, and that young women do not have to choose between power and grace. By the time the world fully recognized Zendaya as a defining figure of her generation, she had already done the hardest work internally, building resilience, self-awareness, and discipline strong enough to withstand both praise and criticism, and this internal strength allowed her to move through fame without being reshaped by it. She became not just a star, but a standard, someone whose journey signaled a shift in what success could look like for young artists, especially those navigating representation, expectation, and pressure simultaneously. Her story speaks to anyone who has felt underestimated, anyone who has had to grow up quickly while staying true to themselves, and anyone who believes that patience, preparation, and purpose can still win in a fast, demanding world. And this is only the beginning, because what comes next in Zendaya's journey is where her influence deepens, where her choices become even more intentional, where her legacy begins to take shape not just through roles, but through the cultural impact she leaves behind, proving that true power isn't about being everywhere at once, but about standing firmly in who you are when the world is watching. As Zendaya stepped further into the spotlight, the pressure around her didn't just increase, it intensified in ways that test identity. Because success at a young age doesn't simply open doors, it also magnifies every move, every silence, every decision, and Zendaya learned quickly that the world would always have an opinion, often before she even finished forming her own. Yet, instead of letting that noise dictate her path, she refined her sense of self, understanding that clarity is a skill, not a gift, and that boundaries are not walls, but tools for survival. She became deliberate with her choices, selective with her voice, and intentional with her energy, realizing that staying visible doesn't require being constantly available. And that power often lives in restraint, especially for women whose narratives are too often written by others. This quiet mastery over her own presence allowed her to grow without fragmentation, to evolve without losing continuity, and to protect her inner life while her outer life expanded beyond anything she had imagined. When Zendaya began taking on more complex, emotionally demanding roles, it wasn't just a professional shift, it was a declaration, a clear signal that she was ready to be seen differently, not as a phase or a moment, but as a serious artist capable of carrying weight, vulnerability, and nuance. And these performances resonated because they were rooted in empathy rather than performance alone. She didn't approach characters as costumes to wear. She approached them as lives to understand, immersing herself in emotional landscapes that required courage, self-awareness, and maturity, and in doing so, she challenged the audience to grow alongside her. These choices were not safe, but they were honest, and honesty, when sustained over time, builds credibility that no viral moment ever could. As acclaim followed, Zendaya handled recognition with a balance that surprised many, receiving praise without clinging to it, accepting awards without allowing them to define her worth, and speaking openly about the collective effort behind individual success, consistently redirecting attention toward collaborators, mentors, and teams, reinforcing the idea that no achievement exists in isolation. This mindset insulated her from the ego traps that derail so many promising careers, because she understood that validation is fleeting, But character compounds, and she invested in the latter with discipline and humility. Even as her name became synonymous with quality, she continued to approach her work with the curiosity of a student, asking questions, learning from veterans, and refusing to assume she had arrived at a final version of herself.